So, for some years now, I have been carrying around this relatively closeted dream, which is that one day the wisdom keepers could share their love, their compassion, not just through words or images, but through frequency and through sound and song and prayer. And I kind of had this sense that the songs would be culturally rooted and intuitive, partially, if not mostly, improvised, kind of like the 64 Faces of Awakening Arts Project, which ended up becoming the Wisdom Keepers in the Oracle deck. The Oracle deck didn't start out as a deck or as an intentional project at all. It was a meditative and restorative practice that I felt I needed to do for my own sanity. It was kind of like soul medicine for me. And then each face or being just came through one doodle at a time with this incredibly compassionate, peaceful, and empathic expression on their face that I really felt healed just looking into their eyes. So later, I opened myself up to receive or channel and eventually record their stories. And then after doing that, I did my best to integrate the archetypes that I felt they represented, just weaving them together with the gene keys, which is a giant synthesis or body of wisdom brought into the world initially by Richard Rudd and expanded upon by so many wise, talented, and creative people. But in the beginning, it was all a very wordless transmission. It was simple and direct and emotionally moving for me, and it turned out other people as well. And then over the past few years, this other longing started to grow inside of me, to somehow allow these beings to express themselves through sound. And actually, if I really think about it, the very first seed of this dream was planted even farther back. I'm thinking like 2012. And I was living in the Bay Area, California at the time, and I was sitting in ceremony with a small group of Gene Keys friends. And during that ceremony, I had a really unexpected and transformative experience, one that I haven't really publicly shared about until now. And during that ceremony, there was a really long time when I was struggling to relax in my own skin, and I was feeling continually pulled out of myself. And I felt like such a strong pull, as I do, as I tend to do in life, to kind of tend to everybody around me, making sure everybody was okay and that everybody had the support they needed. They felt held and seen and witnessed. And then I remember there was this moment where this loving but fierce being or guide or presence came to me. And she was calling me back to myself. She was calling me back to my center, telling me that it was time for me to come out of hiding. It was time to claim my space, to speak my truth, to make some noise. And instead of, just the usual losing myself in the experience and perspective and needs of other people. And I will never forget how she spoke to me with this incredible clarity. And I heard the words like, Rosie, speak up or throw up. It's that simple. And that's when a portal opened. And it was so powerful and a little bit terrifying. And it was if my voice took over. And it took me and ultimately everybody in the room on this kind of crazy and wild journey. It wasn't a performance at all. I actually had very little control over what was happening. And the sounds that came out of my voice were not always pretty. They were often kind of wild and strange, foreign. But I could feel at my core that they were benevolent, and they were there to heal ancient wounds, to help all of us release energy, energy that had been kind of bound up and arrested in our systems. And they were there to kind of give myself and others the courage to trust in our own inner guidance and journeys. And I say they because it wasn't one voice. It was many voices coming through. And it honestly freaked me out a little bit, which is why I haven't talked so much about it. And I'd never really had that experience before. But at the same time, and this is not unusual, I'm sure there are a lot of people in ceremony who have similar experiences, but for me, it was kind of a big deal, so anyway, but at the same time, there was something about the experience that felt really familiar. Like maybe I had done this before, maybe in some other dimension or reality, maybe in a dream. And over time, memories started returning to me, memories of singing in caves, times when I was wailing with grief, times of calling in guardians and protectors and opening up sacred spaces and healing individual and collective wounds with sound. And it was such a powerful experience for me to step aside in this way and to just let something else move through, and something that I really felt had real healing capacity. And of course, for years, I did not have a clue as to what to do with that experience. So I didn't do anything with it. I've tended to be quite shy in general. I know a lot of people don't think that, because my vocation has kind of forced me to be more in public settings, like here on YouTube, for example. But it is really true. You could talk to my sister, my mom, or anyone who's known me well. Being in public has been, pretty horrible, scary for me. And anytime I kind of moved too close to anything that felt even remotely performative, which for me sometimes just meant having my eyes open while I was doing something, I would go into a full-blown visceral panic and then back into hiding. So the idea of singing in front of people felt completely impossible to me, other than maybe with my daughter and my husband, just for fun. Although I will say I have come to believe that whatever happened during that ceremony did have a lot to do with the meditative arts practice that led to the 64 Faces of Awakening in the Wisdom Keepers Oracle deck, because it was really only about 2 years later that I started to call in those faces, through that kind of doodle process. And there's always been something about the multiplicity of one, that's represented by those faces, who celebrate wise, compassionate beings from all over the world, that has really reminded me of my own time in that sacred ceremony, when there was a multiplicity of one moving through me, through vibration, through frequency. And it's so interesting how our paths are forged, right? Like one personal stretch at a time. So anyway, fast forward many years, my family moved to Santa Fe, and that is when I began cultivating a friendship with StarBird Maricle, a sound healer, a singer, a dancer, a performer, a star language communicator, and someone who is just so at home in her voice. She just moves just effortlessly between worlds, from French cabaret to sacred ceremonial spaces. She just brings with her this incredible versatility and courage and comfort and depth of trust. And one of the things I admire most about her, isn't just her talent, of which she has so much, but what for me feels like this incredible courage, right? And her devotion to helping other people like me liberate their own voices as a pathway of healing and transformation. So I felt really drawn to having sessions with her, mostly to experience a safe place where I could start to explore my voice without judgment, right? And she created this very permission-giving, judgment-free container for me, where I could just really slowly let that voice out. And she always set the most loving containers and intentions for our sessions, really calling in all of the helpers from all of the realms, ensuring that whatever came through us would be for the good of all beings. And I can't tell you how much that helped me. There was one session I'm thinking of early on when I was singing or sounding in a pretty intense fashion, I would say. And she received this vision. She's also psychic. And she saw me as one of the last surviving members of a tribe or village that had been brutally killed. And my role at the time was to stand by this central fire in the middle of this devastated village and wail on behalf of everyone, and to grieve for the ravaged village with my voice. And in that same image, she saw herself kind of dancing around the fire, but dressed up as a harlequin, bringing in a sense of lightness, of being, of trust, and this reminder that we are all so much more than these bodies, these monkey suits that we're walking around in. And whether that image was literal in terms of some past, present, or parallel life or future life, who knows, or whether it was symbolic, it really doesn't matter, right? The feeling that arose in me was very real. And it brought back, again, this visceral memory of some of what I had felt and remembered during that ceremony back in 2012. So you could say that at first my sessions with StarBird were essentially about me just daring to make any sound at all in front of another human being. But over time, as I started to feel more safe, we started to play together and improvise together and explore all kinds of voices and rhythms and instruments together. And we let go of the need for beauty and obvious harmony and just surrendered to whatever kind of emotion or energy or sound wanted to come through. And like I said earlier, for me, singing was never about performance or beauty. I mean, StarBird is a performer, right? She also taught dance and was a professional dancer as well. So she's got that background. My background is in expressive arts, right? I was an expressive arts therapist for many years. So for me, it's always been more about expression than performance. And it's been about release and about truth and transformation. And at an even deeper level, it's been about learning to trust in a journey, even when I had no clue what the destination was going to be. So finding such a potential partner, and such a personally liberated one, who could join me there and had both the performance piece, that comfort level and being in front of guiding larger audiences, but also has the expressive arts, deep transformational piece as well, was just so freeing for me and very healing. So eventually I shared my dream with her of creating 64 songs of awakening. And I invited her to join me as my 100% partner. And honestly, I felt a little vulnerable in asking her, not necessarily worthy. But she said yes, like it was an immediate intuitive yes. And it was a really powerful moment for me, and I think for the both of us. And it's a big yes to 64 songs. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. And, neither of us had any idea how we were going to go about such a massive undertaking, but my vision was, for each song to somehow reflect the energetic essence of a wisdom keeper and honor something about their cultural, spiritual, or ancestral roots in some way. And as we started to dream together, we imagined drawing inspiration from ancient songs and prayers from all around the world and in the public domain, while also allowing ourselves the freedom to improvise and make something entirely new. We had no idea how we were going to approach the technological aspect of this, the recording, the composing, the mixing, the mastering. And my God, like I said, 64 songs is not a small number of songs. And I certainly knew how long it took me to draw those faces, right? So this felt even bigger and still does. But I trusted StarBird, right? And she's exactly the kind of soul who would say yes to such a big, mysterious project and trust in its unfoldment. So, like you might guess, the first challenge was my shyness. It was one thing to sing in a private space with StarBird, but the thought of others eventually hearing me sing was like a whole other ball game. But we initiated our project at this amazing place called the Dome of Light in Santa Fe, New Mexico, this round room with the most amazing acoustics. And StarBird and I laid out our altars. We set out our intentions. We sang into the night, song after song, chant after chant. Some of it was improvised, some channeled, some intentionally chosen, some came through her, some were initiated by me. And even though we weren't able to use any of the music that we recorded there, something, really magical happened. And it was like we fully stepped in to the circle, into this dome of commitment, I would call it, our full-heartedness if you're a Gene Keys fan. And it's a good thing we fully committed to the process because there would be plenty of challenges ahead. And one of the main challenges has been technology. Let's just say that I, a total and complete novice, ended up hurling myself into GarageBand, approaching music composition and mixing like a totally uneducated whirling dervish, clipping here, dragging things over there, forgetting to turn off fans and heaters, and recording tracks on top of tracks, making every mistake imaginable. It has been so humbling and at times funny, and at times it's been a little frustrating for everybody involved, not just me. But I do want to say that two of the greatest gifts for this project came when we had called in and were working with our first song. And those gifts were Suzanne Tang and Gilbert Levy, Mystic Journey, who happened to be neighbors and friends and incredible musicians and producers. And they extremely generously invited us into their recording studio and helped us produce, record, mix, and master our song. And it was, the most professional setup that I had ever experienced, with two pairs of headphones, two microphones, incredibly seasoned guidance. Suzanne really helped us find a shape for a composition for the song. And once I got over my embarrassment, at least somewhat, we witnessed the magic of production and refinement, firsthand. So that day also felt like a form of initiation for me in relation to both singing in front of other people, not just people, but extremely accomplished musicians and sweet musicians, and then doing it in a different language. That was also a powerful initiation. And it was for StarBird too, in relation to her mother, who was this beautiful French woman who had recently passed away and who had a particularly deep love for the song that we sang. And I'm going to butcher it with my accent, but I would say La Claire Fontaine. And after that experience, we thought, maybe we really can do this. Now, I also want to give a special shout out to StarBird's husband and deeply talented musician, Michael Maricle. Despite his own incredibly full life and creative commitments, he has helped us master many of our songs. He's contributed stunning piano and instrumental backings on several songs and has shown endless patience as I have handed over my very earnest, yet at times disastrous, multi-tracked, mixed experiments. Anyway, I could show you a picture of what it looks like when you're looking at my computer trying to put a song together. It's actually quite comical, unless you're Michael trying to do something professional with the sound, with my my fans blasting in the background and me forgetting to just listen through my. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all those details. Anyway, for those of you Dream Arc fans, I also want to mention that Michael and StarBird are the proud parents of Luna the Oracle dog, who has been drawing Wisdom Keeper cards for years now and is a celebrity in the Dream Arc, right? So that makes this project even more in the family. And something StarBird and I have been sitting with since the beginning and honestly returning to again and again is how to work with songs and prayers, cultures and languages in a way that feels respectful. Because we're living in a time when conversations about cultural appropriation and sensitivity are super relevant and important, and we don't take those things lightly. And this has actually been a thread in my life for quite a long time. Ever since I was young, I felt drawn to what I kind of think of as a rainbow path, right? Synthesizing across traditions rather than just kind of honing in on one. And that impulse has brought so much beauty and richness into my life. And you could say the Wisdom Keeper's Oracle reflects faces and archetypes from many different cultures. The Gene Keys itself is a giant synthesis of wisdom, bringing in lots of threads and streams from different cultures. The Dream Arc, one of my co-creative babies, right, stepped right into the mythic and even shamanistically inspired waters, right? Even though we never claimed to teach shamanism. But walking this unifying, this inclusive, this multifaceted path has also meant, learning how to walk carefully, without becoming paralyzed with the fear of doing something wrong, right? So when StarBird and I are working with songs or prayers, we tend to move slowly. If we're not completely improvising or responding to the contribution of someone else, we lean towards public domain material. We ask ourselves questions. We stay as rooted as we can in humility and curiosity as opposed to entitlement. If we're touching something ancient, instead of trying to replicate it, we let it move through our own bodies and lived experience and bring something honest and authentic and new forward. And when we need guidance, we ask for help. We don't assume we'll always get it perfectly right. This is an ongoing learning, and it's a paradoxical terrain. What I can say is that when someone hears one of these songs and feels the spirit in it, the sincerity, the love, it feels like medicine for us, right? And we also understand that not everybody's going to experience it the way that we do. The best we can do is keep creating with as much reverence as we know how to bring. And yeah, that felt important to share. That felt important to share. And also, I just want to apologize in advance. Sometimes when we're bringing through something in another language, the pronunciation is not is not perfect. So there's also like an element of generosity that we're asking for, that people understand where we're coming from. We're really coming from a very deep, authentic, and loving place, and doing our best to really hone in on frequency, not get too caught in the details. So, when I really think about it, the challenges that we faced have been huge gifts as well, although not always comfortable. There has been so much playfulness, so much intuition, so much risk taking, rawness, experimentation. We've learned something entirely new with each song. Each piece has its own unique birth story. Sometimes we've started with our own ancestral stories and memories, or an ancient prayer, or sometimes with a specific wisdom keeper in the deck, and then a song would come from there. Sometimes we'd start with a particular culture that we have felt called towards, or with spontaneous sounds that later find their match. Sometimes we've called in a collaborator who's initiated the process with their own musical gifts, and then we improvise together with them, adding our own voices to the mix. It's all been quite fluid, frequency led, like I've said a million times, and very live. So, yeah. So before I bring this share to a close, I would like to take a moment to name a few more of the beautiful collaborators who have blessed our first volume of 11 songs, and there are going to be more to come in volume 2. So interestingly, all of the 64 song collaborators so far have been either wisdom keepers or contributors to the Dream Arc. So in addition to Michael Maricle, of course, StarBird Maricle, and Suzanne Tang and Gilbert Levy, Shay Nichols has contributed her gorgeous voice to the Wisdom Keeper of Intuition song. And my wonderful daughter Maya Aronson, has contributed to the song brought through the Wisdom Keeper of Simplicity together with Michael Maricle. And Santa Fe's beloved medicine man, Dream Arc Wisdom Keeper Wolf Martinez, has brought so much power to the song from the Wisdom Keeper of Leadership. So it has been such an honor to sing alongside these extraordinary beings, and we are looking so much forward to sharing more about them in the months to come. And like I said, there are more voices and collaborators on the way in the coming volumes, and we just can't wait to share them with you as well. So, more practically speaking, we are aiming to release our first volume of 11 songs in the spring of 2026. And then one by one, we're going to be finding creative ways to share the stories and people behind each song. So let's just say this project is this very big experiment, and my deeply healing collaboration with StarBird is closer to my heart than words could ever express. It's got me on my personal edge in every possible way, vocally, creatively, spiritually, technically, relationally. And I am hearing from more and more people in the world right now that during this time of radical change, the realm of sound and frequency and harmonics are becoming more and more important. More and more people I know who are being called to sing, to hum, to listen to music, to engage with frequency. So the thought of inviting people to engage with and experience the Wisdom Keepers through this modality, through sound and song, it just makes me so happy. So whether they're doing it on their own or together with the group, I just love the idea too of like people picking a card and then reading the story and contemplating the questions and then listening to a song. We got to do a little taste of this when I was in British Columbia with Matthew Ashdown and so many other wonderful people, where I did a series of workshops, and I did one which was all about sound, where I got to kind of test this out using the oracle in the room and then allowing that to open the portal to sound. So I hope there's going to be more of that coming. And I don't have to be there for it. You know, people can do it themselves, which is what I'm really excited about. Okay, so I really want to encourage any of you who resonate with this vision to take inspiration from us. Hum more in your life. You know, sing in your shower, join a choir, cry out your tears and your joy into rivers, on top of mountains, right? Inside of caves. This is really a time on our planet where all of our voices are needed. So, with that, and I say together with StarBird, who is with me in spirit, and you're going to get to know a whole lot more in the time to come, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing this process. Thank you for helping to initiate this act of love.